Tommy Boy is a 1995 comedy film that stars Chris Farley and David Spade. It was produced by Lorne Michaels, the creator of Saturday Night Live. And both Farley and Spade were on Saturday Night Live at the time when this film was released. I'm going to talk about this new 4K UHD release. And we're going to talk about the 4K transfer. We're going to take a look at the packaging. And I'm also going to talk about my impressions of the film the first time I saw it. And it's been a long time since I've seen this film. I did see it in 95 when it first came out. And I saw it a lot of times. And then I thought it was friggin' hilarious. But this is the first time I've seen it in a really long time. But if you would do me a favor, if you're kind of digging this video, which I'm sure you are so far, if you go ahead and like this thing. I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. Previously in 1992, Saturday Night Live found a lot of success with Wayne's World, with Mike Myers and Dana Carvey. And this is like another pairing that is funny too, because both of these films have Rob Lowe in the supporting cast, in both instances playing a villain. He's billed in Wayne's World. He gets the "and" credit in the opening and on the back of Wayne's World. Here, he's not billed, even though he has a fairly major supporting part. He was contractually under obligation from the Stand at the time, so he couldn't be billed to be in the film. But he has a pretty good bit of screen time here, and pretty hilarious, and pretty shitty character, but pretty great. But But the main plot of this film concerns Tommy Callahan, played by Chris Farley. He is basically, his dad owns this Callahan auto parts store, and his dad's trying to get him to work there, but he's in school, and at the beginning of it, he's in college, and he's barely passed. He passed with a D, but everyone's congratulating him. His dad's kind of on his side. He kind of supporting dad, even though he knows he's kind of a screw up. But he's trying to help his son out. But his dad's also got a new fiance that he's going to get remarried to, played by Bo Derek. And Derek's son shows up, played by Rob Lowe. And then Rob Lowe kind of hangs out with Tommy a little bit. But that's not really the main plot of the film, even though that part's pretty awesome. But what eventually happens, Brian Dennehy playing the dad, and he plays this. I don't really like Brian Dennehy anyway, but he plays the dad really well, and it's a very a lot of enthusiasm, and he just kind of it seems some heart. There's definitely a really good scene between Chris Farley and Brian Dennehy right before the dad's about to get married. But after the wedding, they're dancing, and the dad dies, and then Tommy has to kind of step up. And he takes David Spade's character, who is he works there, and he's kind of a dry, sarcastic, like wisecracking guy who's kind of like by the books. Nobody likes him, but he's pretty smart, and he kind of knows the business, but he's just got a very unlikable personality. But he ends up having to go with him on a road trip to kind of get to sell the auto parts to the vendors, or to the customers, and he's kind of having to take his dad's place, and there's a problem with the stock and all that. And so most of this film is a road trip film, and it's basically those two guys together. It has a lot of heart in it, even though he is quite, especially for quite some time. There's they're kind of going for comedy more than anything else, because he's such a screw up. Like, he goes into this guy's office, and he's trying to show him how the auto parts work, and he actually catches the guy's toy car on fire in his office, just doing really ridiculous things. Eventually, because of the plot, has to turn around. But it's I found it quite funny on this watch as well. Some of the things I didn't think were as funny as I used to, but I still found myself laughing out loud at several times during the film. I think it still holds up. It's definitely not very politically correct. I think that Chris Farley does a really good performance here ultimately. He does a lot of physical comedy, but he also has a love interest. Julie Warner plays a character at the auto shop store, who she's kind of the bookkeeper, and she does the filing, and she ends up playing a part in the plot as well later on. But there's a pretty good chemistry between the two of them, and I really like Julie Warner's eyes are just really soulful, I think. And I've seen her in Nip Tuck. She played a pretty good character on that, and I've seen her in other films as well. But I really think it was a good match, and the way that they didn't like put him with some like really, she looks good. I'm not saying she doesn't look good, but they didn't put her with some bombshell like model actress. That's kind of the thing a lot of times that with these bigger actors, they want to put them with these really hot women. Not, but I think it was a good pick for her. Not to say she's not hot, but she's not like hot, like model hot sort of thing. The film was directed by Peter Segal. Peter Segal has directed a lot of other comedy films like The Naked Gun, 33 and a Half, Smell of Fear, I think was the subtitle on that one, and also The Nutty Professor 2, I think The Clumps, and then 50 First Dates. But he's directed a lot of comedy films, including this one, and he does a really good job directing comedy. I think he really got some good performances out of the actors here. Now, a large part of the comedy in this film deals with this car, like David Spade's car. They go in his car and they're driving cross country in it, and he's all anal about the car. And the first thing that happens is Chris Farley has some M&Ms. He puts it up on the dash, and they all like go down into the dash. And as the film progresses, the car gets more and more messed up. And probably one of the best scenes, I think, with the car is he's at the he's getting gas, and Chris Farley has the door open. David Spade goes inside to pay, and Chris Farley backs the car up, and it just tears the door up. And then he like tries to fix it back, and David Spade comes out to open the door, and the whole door just falls off the car. And then Chris Farley's like, "What did you do?" And it's just it's such a great moment. Well, but right before David Spade opens the car door, he looks at it, he sees a little smudge on there, he wipes it off, and then he opens the door, and then it falls off. It really works very well. But the car thing. Later on, they run over a deer and they put it in the back of the car, and it's not dead. They think it's dead, and then it wakes back up, and it tears the car up. But the car thing, I thought it was quite hilarious back then. It's still funny, especially the car door one. But it does remind me a lot of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. This is also a recent Paramount Pictures release. But the car thing does happen similarly in this, where they end up getting a car that's completely trashed and having to drive around on it. But the gags still work. It's a lot more of car getting damaged in this film than Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, but it's done really well in both films. Now, I'm sure some of you have clicked on this video to hear about the 4K transfer and whether or not this film is worth an upgrade to 4K. So let's talk about that. So before we do that, I do want to open this up. We're going to take a quick peek at it. So it does have a nice slipcover on it, and the same artwork on the inside that's on the outside. Has not one, it also has a digital code, but not one, but two discs. It's got a Blu-ray and a 4K. And the Blu-ray is not the same transfer as the 4K, but it's a good thing because it kind of gives you an idea about what the Blu-ray is. And sometimes I think, now when I was watching the film in 4K with HDR, and it looks really good, by the way, I wasn't thinking that it looked as good as it does. And I knew that once I looked at the Blu-ray, I was like, they did a lot of work on this to get it looking the way that it does in the 4K. And that's the weird thing is like when you're watching something like this, sometimes you don't connect that because especially if you don't look at the Blu-ray. There is a lot more resolution. Clearly, it's a lot more pixels, and when you bump it to 4K, but you also see a lot more detail in the faces. I think the HDR adds a lot. It brings a lot more realistic looking flesh tones or flesh tones. That's a weird. I meant skin tones. It brings the skin tones out, and they just look more lifelike and more rich, and there's more contrast involved with all that. And it's definitely, to me, it's worth upgrading it, even though you may not realize it when you're watching it the first time. But the thing about, I guess, a film like this is if you're not necessarily watching it for it to look really good. You're watching it for the comedy aspects and the kind of the chemistry between Farley and David Spade. Now, the black levels look pretty good. You see some pretty good detail in there. Now, there is some exterior night scenes, especially earlier on when Chris Farley's hanging out with Rob Lowe. You do see some exterior nights, and they do seem a little grainier. Now, Now, if you look really close, you do see some film grain. This was shot on film, and you can see some film grain. I didn't notice it while I was watching it, but when I was looking back at it, I was like, okay, the film grain's there, but it is nicely resolved. It's not distracting it wasn't distracting to me. I think the colors generally just kind of pop out because of the 4K and the HDR, and if you look at the textures, especially Tommy Boy's wearing this coat, and you can see the textures on the coat. It really looks very 4K like, and I would recommend the 4K transfer. And it's I thought it was pretty well done. I didn't see a lot of digital correcting or anything. At first, I was thinking that it looks really clean, but then I looked at it a little bit better. I mean, they could be in there, and I just don't see it. But I do see the film grain, and I see the texture on faces. So I don't think if there was some cleanup, it's not like a lot of it. I didn't see it very frequently. Now, some of the gags, there was a couple of gags, which I'm going to point out a couple of them that I didn't think were too funny, and maybe they weren't. I didn't really ever think they were funny, but they're definitely not now. And it's just the first one, and this is just because of it's gross. Like at one point, Chris Farley's in the back of the car, and they have I guess they pick up a hitchhiker, like a girl, and she has a dog, and he's drooling. Chris Farley's asleep, and the dog's like drooling all over the place. He's got like dog drool all over his face, and he like licks it. It's just friggin' gross. And not to me, that wasn't funny. And then there's another scene which this doesn't even make any sense. Like there's a girl out by the swimming pool. Now the first part of it's funny. There's a girl out getting in the swimming pool at night. They're in a hotel, and Chris Farley walks up. He's like, "Oh, where's the gym?" That's great, asking her where the gym is. But then the girl at this public pool that's at a motel, David Spade's looking out the window, and the girl decides to go skinny dipping. She just takes all her clothes off, and then so he starts like masturbating, watching her, and then Chris Farley walks in on him when he's masturbating, and then he makes a bunch of jokes about it. Now, that part I thought was a little uncalled for. It's just kind of, I don't know. I guess I don't think I ever thought that was funny, but I definitely thought it was even less funny in this time than ever. Something about that scene just doesn't look good as far as like the way the lighting is, and I don't know. It looks better in 4K because I looked at that scene because I was like, I noticed the lighting looked kind of weird because of the lamp light, and it looks even worse in the Blu-ray than it does on the 4K. So let's go ahead and rate the film on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. I'm going to give Tommy Boy a 4-star rating. Now that I think it is hilarious. I think that the great chemistry between Chris Farley and David Spade that may come from a nostalgia point of view from me, but I think, especially because it was kind of the time period when this came out, I was really like digging these type of movies, and I really wish they would make more films like this now. And I think as far as this 4K release, I'm going to give it a 4-star rating too. I think that anyone who's a fan of Chris Farley or his films and likes 4K releases, I would recommend this. It does have a Blu-ray in there, but the Blu-ray is an older release, and you'll find that it's not as sharp, and it's there's a lot less detail on it, and it's cool that it's in there because then you can see the difference between that and the 4K. But if you would check out some of my other videos, I did a review on Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, the classic Thanksgiving story that has a lot of qualities of this film to this film, and there's some similarities to the films. They both have heart when it eventually comes down to it. And I think it works very well in both of the movies. And if you haven't done so already, if you would subscribe to my channel, like this video. I'm Dave Watkins. Thanks for watching.